Welcome to Call the Nurse, life support for the stories that don't make it in the chart. Because not all wounds are visible and not all healing is clinical. I'm Mindie, a nurse, a mom and wife, and someone who's lived through pain, joy, and everything in between. Each week, I'll be sharing life experiences, not only from the front lines of nursing, but we'll dive into the raw and unfiltered moments of parenting and marriage, and also explore what it truly means to heal body, mind, and heart. So whether you're going through your own personal transformation or just need a place to feel understood, you've come to the right place. So take a deep breath. You're not alone. Let's talk about it. Let's call the nurse. Welcome back to Call the Nurse, your weekly dose of life support. My guest today is Camille Block, author of Hope for Secondhand Suffering, Tools for the Heart When You Can't Fix Your Loved One's Pain. Camille's an author, entrepreneur, and executive career coach, and serves as medical conservator, advocate, and voice for her brother Kevin, who lives with severe nonverbal cerebral palsy called quadriplegia. Her book gives voice to silent secondhand sufferers to feel seen, heard, and known while inviting them on a heart journey towards hope. This episode hits close to home for me because I cared for her brother Kevin as a nurse. I saw firsthand not only his challenges, but also the ripple effect of suffering that touches the whole family. Camille's book brings words to something I witnessed but never really had a word for: what it means to carry someone else's pain and how to find hope and healing through it. So welcome, Camille. Thank you so much for coming. It means so much to me. And it's been probably 7 or 8 years since we've seen each other in that hospital room, 1323 bed 2. I remember the exact room he was in.
I know that.
Yes.
It's so nice to be here, and you made such an impact on our life. That time was a very, very difficult time in my life, and you were a bright and shining light that actually was someone that stood out in the 8 weeks we were struggling. And we started out with you, and we never forgot you, and we didn't want to leave you.
Aw,
so it's really nice
you.
to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. I felt that way about you guys too. There's just some families you just kind of bond with. And it's so crazy that I ran into your dad a few weeks ago at a random hospital event. And then I thought, okay, we've been talking about getting together. And I thought, okay, this is a sign.
That
we
was
got
a big
to.
sign, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So it was great seeing him. And you guys really stood out to me because we see patients like this come into the hospital a lot. Wow. And we see them usually coming in alone and being alone pretty much the entire time. And even as a nurse, I'll call family and maybe they do live somewhere else or whatever, but a lot of times they are kind of battling this stuff alone. And one of the things that really stood out to me that you would always tell me is that Kevin is always joyful. You would always tell me he's usually smiling, like he's not usually like this. And I remember just thinking, like, I got to listen to her, because so many times patients like this come in the hospital and we assume that they're not cognitively there or they really don't know what's going on just because they can't move, right? Or they can't talk. And I remember you telling me, like, this is not my brother. And I thought, okay, I got to listen to her. Wow. You know, we can get in our nursing kind of schedules and tasks and medications, and we think we know what's best for them. But when a family member has been so taking care of a patient like that, I thought, I got to listen to her. She knows what he needs. So
yeah, I know a lot of times I have to explain that to every doctor. I feel like I have to go to every doctor's appointment because I want them to know he's in there. Yeah. Don't discount him. I feel like I have to say, he's there. He's really in there.
It's so true. It's so true.
So
because we get in our routine of taking care of these people, and without a voice, we don't really know, what's going on sometimes. Anyway, I just feel like the medical field ignores that sometimes, and we just get caught up in our own experiences. But you knew your brother, and your father was at the bedside, so much as well. And I just remember seeing the love and the weight that you guys carried. What was it like for you living that experience day to day? Granted, he's been in and out of the hospital a lot. at that point, this is pre-COVID, you were in the hospital I worked at, but just in general, being in the hospital when you're going through this with him, what is that like, the weight of that, trying to advocate with him? And we'll talk a lot about advocating later, but just that day to day with him.
Really hard.
Yeah.
That was actually, my mom had died a few years earlier, and I had taken on the role, although my mom never really took on this role, but I had taken on the role as almost mother of my brother and big sister for sure. People think I'm his mother. I'm like, I'm not his mother. He's only 3 years younger. But I think that was the beginning of a very difficult 8-week journey. I actually do talk about that specific journey in my book. I didn't mention your name. I wish I had now because I didn't know that we'd be
Aw.
reunited. But
I wonder in some of the hospital settings you talk about, I'm like, I wonder if that one of those were at Holy Cross. Well, should doesn't matter. I wonder sometimes if some of those experiences happened at my hospital, because I know he's been at several. So
yeah, probably probably not, because he, after that we started going to different hospitals, but that was the beginning. I think we were 3 weeks there, which is extremely long for a hospital. It was either 2 or 3 weeks, but it was a total of 8 weeks that we were dealing with aspiration pneumonia with my brother. And you were the shining light in that very difficult, dark time. I think what was especially hard is we lived about 45 minutes away, and my brother can't really be left alone because every nurse shift has different people. You never know who's working the next day, and they don't usually tell you in time for you to like prep them. And I was always happy when there was someone who's going to be the same one that he had one day the next day, because it was so exhausting re-explaining everything and
Yes.
and fighting for every little thing. So my dad and I were switching off roles at that time, and that was a godsend that we had each other. My little brother had a new baby, and so he really wasn't available. He did help out when he could, but it was, with young kids, it's hard. So it was extremely emotionally challenging. I think that was the first time that the beginning of the 8 weeks, I felt like I do have a voice for him, but it didn't happen until later in the journey. So when I met you, he was just it felt like he was going to die. I mean, he didn't look good.
He was very sick.
Very, very sick with aspiration pneumonia. And he'd struggled with pneumonia a lot of his life. But I'd say overall, to answer your question, the weight was overwhelming. And that particular journey for 8 weeks after you guys, we were sent to a skilled nursing home, which, no offense to owners of skilled nursing homes or people who work there, because it's so needed, but it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
We
Most
had
of them are, unfortunately, just the patient loads and what you're able to
it
do.
wasn't fair to
Yeah.
these nurses. I learned so much. I feel like if I could advocate for that, I would. I'm just
Yeah.
still so busy advocating for my brother. But we were 3 weeks at a skilled nursing, and then another 2 weeks at a different hospital closer to home, because we were breaking. So we were falling apart. And during that time, I'm just going to jump to the hardest part of it is I had never felt this way in my life, but I felt, and I won't even use the word, but I felt like I didn't even want to live anymore. That's how bad it was. I was so dark. That's not me. It was like I was someone I didn't even know anymore. I had no reserves anymore, and my dad had no reserves. So it was hard. But your hospital was probably the best in terms of nursing support, because you just were checking on us and just like you're this like our little angel watching out for us. So I don't know how to describe it better than that for right now, but
Well, the
here's
interesting
the
thing is
video.
that I actually wasn't his direct nurse. I was a resource nurse, and we try to kind of monitor the floor and we monitor kind of what's going on with everybody. But there was just something that stood out with you guys and how much you guys cared.
Wow. Never knew
Because-
that. I would have assumed you were his nurse. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I know. And I felt that, you do feel a responsibility a little bit too of, okay, let's explain, this family is very involved. Listen to them. They know what's going on. Because we do have, it's kind of, we put out a little reel a few weeks ago about how, okay, families like, don't, coach us from the bedside. Like, don't yell at us on how to do the IV pumps, right? But
Right.
in this situation, you guys you knew him, and I needed to listen to you, on that.
I mean,
you
if
know what his motions meant. You knew what his
people
eyes
left
meant.
him alone for a second, he could pull out all of his IVs, because his arm, is very spastic and it's very strong. And so I have
Very
to tell,
strong.
and like he'll sink down and the oxygen mask will come off of him. And like, so he needs kind of constant care.
Yeah, and I thought, I think at the time he had a trach. I
No.
thought, did he never have a trach?
Never had a
I
trach.
wondered. I couldn't
G-tube, but
remember.
no trach.
G-tube, yeah. When I was his nurse, I did feel often the emotional toll of, wanting to ease not just his pain, but your guys's as well. I mean, you guys were always at the bedside. And I mean, I'm assuming you were working. I think your dad was still at the time, but I don't think he had retired
No,
yet.
he was
He's a
working.
professor at Pepperdine. Um, just everybody, around him. Did you feel that too? Like the invisible pressure to kind of hold everyone together. You talk a lot about that in the book. How you became kind of the one.
I did. I back up. My dad might have been retired by then, but he was still pretty active in his life. I mean, he had things going on and
Mm-hmm.
still consulting some, but yeah, I felt the weight of it on my hands because my dad's of the generation which he'll honestly admit that like you just trust the doctors, just leave and trust it all, like it'll work. And I had to like awaken him to like it doesn't always work like that. You kind of got
Right.
to speak up. You got to ask questions. You got to get second and third opinions, and you
Mhm.
got to challenge things. You got to do your own research.
Yeah.
So I felt that burden because that's how I felt, and I was on the way training my dad. This was a transition time where he eventually we're both co-conservators,
Mhm.
but he eventually turned it over. Like he's still a co-conservator, but he said you're in charge
Yeah.
because he's seen that it's worked.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
I
I
felt the
noticed
weight.
in the book too, you do talk a lot about how that your mom and dad did come from a generation of you just trust the doctors, you just trust the medical field. And there was something in you that kind of needed to seek to understand, research. And it seems like you were like that since you were like really young too.
Um, it got more as I grew. I think there's probably some DNA in there for sure, but I think a lot of my earlier life, I didn't trust that voice.
Mhm.
I felt very frustrated a lot internally, but I never knew I was allowed to ask
Yeah.
questions or question what
Right.
my parents said or question the doctor. I remember when they tried to put Kevin on the G tube and I was like, no, no, no. And they're like, we need to trust what the doctors say. I'm like, no, that doesn't seem right. It just, I have a strong gut.
Yeah.
So I think I always
Gut
questioned things,
instinct.
but I never felt the freedom to do something about it
Yeah.
until later.
Yeah. It was interesting. You said how had you kind of known what you know now, that if we would have just kind of pushed things a little bit more or really realized how cognitively he was there, that perhaps his quality of life would have been a little bit different. Was that how
Yeah, I
you kind of
still
felt?
I still feel like that. And
Mm,
and not just cognitively, but physically. I
mm,
mean, when he had a day program when he was young, until they cut off funding at age 21. And so during those years, he would be kind of shipped off on a bus and he loved it. He loved he's an extro I think he's a total extrovert. If anybody does the Enneagram, I think he's a 7. Like he loves getting out there and being, fun and doing fun things and taking risks and adventures.
yeah.
So he enjoyed like going off to school and there they had him in a walker with wheels and they would strap him in. He couldn't bear his own weight, but they would push him and his legs would go like this and
Mhm.
he would run and I have a video I found of it years later and I was like, "Oh, why did we stop that?"
Mm.
Because right
Because
now,
instinctively he knew what to do, right? I
oh,
mean,
yeah, I mean, it's atrophy, cerebral palsy. Like if you don't intervene, it's
mhm.
atrophy. And I feel like so much of his physical condition now is because when that funding left at age 21, and sadly, he just sat in a wheelchair.
When you say
And
funding, what does that mean? Is that something like the regional center, or is that something? What is funding
I could be wrong on this because
or
I only know
disability
right
or?
now, but back then, my dad would probably know, but I believe it came from the state. It's federal or a combination of federal and state dollars that help with education for children.
Mhm.
But when you have children with disabilities, they're treated very differently than adults with
Mhm.
disabilities, and I've learned that. And I feel like they kind of just after 21, okay,
Well, because
basically.
my daughter, even with regional center, they have a certain kind of cutoff, getting services and stuff. So that just seems like that would be really challenging if you feel like you're kind of on your own. But I'm still very amazed because again, I see patients come in and had he not had the involvement at all, I'm not convinced he has would have lived as long as he has because
Oh,
you guys really took on a mission to where you could have easily put him in the home and gone and visit and just kind of moved on with your lives, but you guys did not do that. None of you. I mean, you and your dad in particular obviously didn't know your mom, and I want to talk a little bit about her later, but where did that come from in you of like, I'm going to be my brother's keeper?
oh, that's a good question. I think It was progressive. I think as a child, I felt this innate sense of this is, it really broke me. Looking back, I've learned this later, but looking back, like they put him in a group home or technically it's called an ICF when
Mhm.
he was 3.5 years old.
Mhm.
And so part of my trauma, my trauma that I realized only when I was older,
Mm.
when I'm going through, my own heart journey, is when they took him away. It really broke something in my
Mm.
soul, and
Mhm.
I
Yeah, you mentioned you got anxiety after you weren't quite sure if it was related to him, but as a
Yeah,
kid.
very sad though as a child, very
Mhm.
sad. I just felt alone. I felt like something was missing. I never understood why they needed to take him away. There is a story. They did their best. They had advice, and the doctors were saying, "Oh, just put him away. He won't know any better." Because they said he's mentally retarded was the words they used. And I know we don't say that these days, but they said he doesn't know anything. Well, they were wrong. They were actually
Mhm.
wrong. The MRI. We had a good friend of mine, neurosurgeon. He's one of the endorsers of my book. He did an MRI complimentary for us when he was older in his mid-20s, and
Mhm.
his brain is fully
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it
He
looked
just
like there was
has
some atrophy, but that was just from not using
atrophy,
it.
100%
Yeah,
atrophy all
yeah.
around it. But so getting back to your comment, oh gosh, what was your
You
comment?
being your brother's keeper,
Being
like
my brother's keeper.
how did that.
One of the catalysts, I think as I got older, I realized, oh, I do know stuff. Like I'm
Mhm.
not completely wrong. Like this isn't right. And I started trusting my instinct a little bit more, but it wasn't when I was in college, I talk about this, that when I became my brother for a day, it was one of my sociology projects and at Pepperdine. And we had to do something crazy and weird and get a societal reaction as a sociology thesis project. And I became my brother. And so I tell about in the book.
Yeah.
I read it at my book launch. It was a really fun but learned experience where I felt a deeper level of empathy than I've ever had
Mhm.
being in a place for an entire school day where I couldn't speak and I couldn't move my
Yeah.
body and they had to
Yeah.
feed me and things happened and I was like, this is horrible. Like I felt what he felt.
And I
And
remember,
I
is that when you said, I'll never talk to him like a baby again and I won't speak loud because I think he can't hear me? I remember you
right,
saying about
yeah,
that. Like, I'm
yeah.
not going to talk to him like he's a baby. He knows
A baby and bilingual or like can't speak the language or
or
something.
can't hear, right?
Right. And those are good caregivers. I certainly don't want to throw caregivers under the bus because they're the heroes of everything. But at the time, I did feel that way. It's
Yeah.
like, why are they talking to me like this? And like, why are they shoving this thing in my mouth when I'm spitting it out and I don't want
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
But I think that's when the empathy really kind of kicked in more. And then it was until after when I met you, after those 8 weeks,
Mm.
the last 2 weeks at a third hospital, I had an epiphany of what was wrong because he was screaming in pain.
Mm.
And that was one of the 8 weeks thing that really secondhand suffering. I was really suffering because he was
Mhm.
screaming in pain. It would turn red,
Mm.
and I didn't know what was wrong. Nobody knew what was wrong. And but that last 2 weeks of that 8 week journey, I had a gut feeling about what it was, and I was able to research it. And then I fired his doctor because he wasn't listening to me. Found a palliative care doctor who's
Mhm.
incredible, listened to me, and I think he thought he was going to die. So I signed all the DNR and all the stuff. But I'm
Mhm.
like, I knew he wasn't going to die. We're going to save him, and I'm going to figure it out. And I did. I figured out what was wrong. It took a long time to implement, but it was a gas related thing from
Mhm.
the G tube formula he was on, which I
Wow.
never wanted him to be on in the first place. So I was able to make a lot of changes,
Yeah.
and I think the brother's keeper came in when I realized I do count. I
Mm.
can be his voice. I can make a difference.
Mhm.
It is not all lost. We can improve. I may not be able to heal him of quadriplegia, cerebral palsy,
Right.
but what if I could heal him from his pain?
Yeah.
Or what if I could
Or
be an
speak for him.
instrument, speak
Yeah.
for
Speak
him?
for him.
Yeah. So
That's what
that
he
was
didn't have. And if he was only 3.5 when he went in, I mean, you were only what, a couple years older.
6
I mean, you
something.
really didn't have that much time with him, but it seems like you had just a strong bond with him regardless.
Yeah, I think looking back, my memories are really just I was always with him, and we would, I think looking back, my parents just put us in front of a TV. But what else would you do? And I that was my job. I read in the book, I was his head always turns to the
Mhm.
right because
Mhm.
he's got like scoliosis and his head droops, and so my
Mhm.
job would be to sit in the chair and hold. It's really this hand, but hold his
Yeah.
head up and watch Mr. Rogers and
Yeah, you
Sesame
put
Street.
great photos. I loved having knowing him and that big smile of his. It was really cool to see those
Mhm.
pictures when he was little because everybody has a story. I just interviewed somebody earlier and the wife that has no memory anymore, but she has a story. She has a family that knew her and you've known Kevin
Yeah.
since he was a baby. And I feel like that's where that advocacy came from. You put something in the book here um, that I love, the Ralph Waldo Emerson. It says, trust instinct to the end, even though you can give no reason.
Yeah.
And you also talk about the caregivers and how these people are all advocates, or you talk about the friend, the different people who have become these advocates for whoever it may be. And you said perhaps another advocacy actions will change the situation completely, but they do help and can give meaning and purpose to life when we stand in the gap to be their voice. To be an advocate is to do for others what you would want them to do for you.
Yeah.
I thought that was so that's so true. Like we want somebody to kind of stand, in the gap for us. And I'm sure going into a hospital, saying these things, trust me, my brother's in there. He's smiling. He's there. He knows. I'm sure you talk about the squeaky wheel and how you're okay being the squeaky wheel. But how did doctors,
Oh.
yeah, what did you feel from doctors and nurses as you were trying to be an advocate for him? And I'm going to mention COVID here in a second, but even pre-COVID, what was that like for you?
Wow. There's a big difference between the older generation doctors and the younger. I will say
Yes.
this. I
Yes.
learned that. I often, I would say 80% of the time, just to guess, I felt very dismissed by the doctors.
Mhm.
And I don't mean any disregard for the doctor profession. I mean,
Mhm.
bless you. We need you. But that's how I felt. Very dismissed.
Not listened to.
Oh, they give you 30 seconds or less to make your point. And then they immediately have an objection. They know that I hate to say this. I don't know if I'm allowed to even say this, but it was hard. I felt
What's your
like,
experience? I mean,
yeah. And
it's what you felt and it's your experience. And listen, I witnessed it of them already coming in. They've already read the chart and coming in that this family's just in denial.
they kind of just,
They
when they
don't
say
get it.
Kevin, they just think, oh,
Mhm.
I feel, they don't say this, of course, but I feel like they think, well, what value in life is he
Yeah.
offering? Like,
What
why
quality
even
of
bother?
life?
Why do you care? Like,
Yeah.
I- there, but then there's others, there's a rare others that get it.
Mhm.
And, they were really special. And I've had that a little bit more outpatient.
Mhm.
There's a part,
Probably because there's continuity of care too, I think. Because I think for me, I started to believe you when you were talking to me about Kevin being, how he's in there and he's smiling. Because then I witnessed the smile and I was like, oh,
smile
she's
gets
right.
you.
She's right. This guy knows. I mean, I would walk in a room. The nurses would come get me because they're like, he only smiles at you. And I thought, then that tells you he's in
He
there.
likes pretty women.
Yeah,
I
I'm
will
like,
say
he's
that.
yeah. I mean, if it were just about people, he'd probably smile at everybody. But the fact that he was very specific about who he smiled at tells you there's more going on cognitively than what we're, allowing the family to kind of, tell us. And I do think doctors do come in sometimes, and not all of them, because some of them are really phenomenal,
I
especially
know.
when they're consistent, in the care to where they've seen the patterns. But a lot of them come in and go, "What quality of life is this? Why aren't you just kind of letting him go in a
Which
sense?"
is kind of what they told my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just put him
Mm-hmm.
away.
Mm-hmm.
So but again, there were some really wonderful ones too. And I think I've noticed a change. I think the newer ones coming up in the field, I don't think they're not the old school thinking. They actually think, oh, sometimes medicine and science is an art. It's
Yes.
not always,
Yeah.
there's not always formulas,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can't predict things. And so I'm a bit of a edgy challenger on some things, and I tend to lately more than ever be a little bit more alternative care, and
Mhm.
so that sometimes puts them on the defense,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do that. So I've learned how to work with doctors.
Yeah.
I've
How
learned
to talk to them.
you got to
Yes.
say it really fast. You got to give
Yes.
them bottom line first.
Yes.
Kind of like I need to do with my husband. Sometimes like, give me the bottom line,
Right.
and then I'll ask questions
And
if I
make
need
them
it.
feel like it's their idea and they're in charge.
Right. And ask them their opinions, show
That's marriage too,
respect. Yeah, it
by the
is
way.
kind of marriage as well. Show respect. But what I think the thing that bothered me the most was when they didn't give me the time.
Mm.
Because you can see I wrote kind of a long book. I talk in longer sentences. I can't do it in 30
Yeah,
seconds.
you need the
Can you give
time.
me 10 minutes? Just give
Mhm.
me 10 minutes. I can do it in
Yeah.
10 minutes. I could probably do it in 5. But Yeah,
Yeah.
the feeling rushed,
Yeah.
like they got somewhere better to go.
Yeah.
That was hard.
That's hard for all patients, but especially if you're trying to be a voice for a patient. I
Yeah.
think that's in
But the nurses
particular.
were amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
the nurses were our lifeline
Yeah.
for sure,
Well, they're the eyes and ears and
especially those nighttime nurses when like you have this quiet, they just take more time.
yeah.
And that's especially a hard
Yeah.
job to do that
And it's
for
a
sure.
hard as a daytime nurse too when you feel the wanting and the desire to I want to give more to this family. I want to give more to this patient, but the system itself, and you do talk about that with even hospitals and even long-term care, that the system almost just doesn't prevent you. And now it's crazy when even we talk about lunch breaks with nurses and whatever. Like, oh, you can't break two people at a time and this and that. And I'm like, were these people around at COVID? Like, do they know what we were doing in COVID? We literally kind of had to choose who we were going to prioritize
Right.
because it was such a, and I can't imagine, I know for families, it was, I always say, because I had my first patient die during COVID. And it was a horrific time where she had, woke up. Her husband had died in his sleep at 44 years old.
Oh,
She was a bit older, just had found out she has cancer. They'd adopted this baby. She's now 7, and her family couldn't be with her. I walked in one day and she was watching her husband's funeral on the phone because they had waited 2 weeks and they wouldn't let her obviously go home. She was sick and they needed to do the funeral. But then the family, the little girl couldn't be with her. And I thought to myself, like, what are we doing here? Like, how are we? I truly believe this, and I say this all the time. And listen, we didn't know what was going on, right? We did the best we could with what we had.
exactly.
We didn't know enough about it. People really were fearful.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of people died prematurely because we broke their spirit, not because they were as sick as anybody else, but because their family wasn't able to hold their hand or their daughter or son was not able to get in and just cuddle them in the bed and hug them and tell them, I'm here. We're trying to do things from an iPad. That was like, I read some of this with you, what you guys went through during COVID and not being able to be a voice for him. That had to have been an absolute nightmare. In fact, I think you say in here, thankfully I was educated on what was happening and what Kevin needed. And I was well versed on the details of COVID outbreaks so I could have intelligent conversations with the doctors. Hence, you knew how to talk to them, right? Aiding in my credibility, which is sad that you would have to do to begin with. And you say, in this situation, it took a combination of honey, the respect, kindness, and wisdom, and vinegar. I call it the sandwich theory. Talking soft,
Right,
give
that
the
too.
meat, and then the soft. Unrelenting boldness, annoying tenacity, firing a doctor and not giving up just to save my brother. And you even say in here, our gut, heart, instinct, conscience often tells us when something is not right. And it is then when we are in the right position to squeak, meaning the squeaky wheel, hopefully with honey, and advocate for what is right for our loved ones. And I do agree with you. I mean, when you dab a little honey on it, it is better. And you do learn that it's like parenting, I think, too. Like if I'm going to yell at my daughter and just boss her around, I'm not going to get very far with her. But you learned as an advocate, especially during COVID, in order to get my brother what he needs, I'm going to have to kind of, I got to work with the system,
Totally.
right?
Yes. Yes. And I think with honey and vinegar, unlike the sandwich theory, which is within each honey and vinegar, yes, you need the sandwich, but it was almost like I would do honey 80% of the time, but I felt like this warrior came over me.
Yes.
Don't you dare mess with my brother. I know exactly what
Mhm.
he needs right now.
Mhm.
And and that's when the vinegar or I don't know, it's a lack of, I'm not sure if that's the best phrase, but it's like a boldness comes over
Yes.
me and I suddenly lose all my fear of man and what they
Yeah.
think of me.
Yeah.
And I like people to like me. I'm a people pleaser
Yeah. Me
at
too.
heart. But you know what? When I'm willing to give that up and fight for my brother to the death,
Yeah.
that's what I mean by vinegar. It's almost
Yeah.
like an either or. And of course, if I can be kind and respectful, I
Mhm.
need to be. But during COVID, it pushed my limits. And there were times when I lost my cool at some of the administrators where he lives. These are not even doctors or nurses. These are,
Administration.
yes.
Mhm.
And I was going to say bureaucratic administration,
Well,
but it's
that can
not
be
their
too.
fault. They're under a licensing that they can
Yeah.
get shut down
At
and they
the end
can
of the
lose their
day, it's a
jobs.
business. sometimes I feel it as a nurse when I'm walking in and the patient ratios and this and that. It's a business. We work with it as much as we can in the system,
It's a
but
business, but it's run by public health.
yeah,
And sometimes public health, especially during COVID, didn't make a lot of sense. It was actually public harm, the rules
so
that they
true.
had. And so my brother, even when he wasn't sick, he was isolated
Mm-hmm.
for 14 days, 20 days after the hospital, even though he was totally
And used to
healthy.
having you guys around all the
Not just
time
us,
too.
isolate from other
Yeah,
staff,
everybody. Yeah,
isolate like hazmat suits and masks. He didn't see
yeah.
us smile for 3 years.
Mm.
Didn't see anyone
Oh,
smile. And then when we did finally remove our smiles, our mask outside, far away from everybody, the first day we could see him after not being allowed to see him for 14 months, we kind of got in trouble for it because even though we got approval, we did it too long and then we got in trouble and he had to be isolated for 14 days.
yeah. Because he was
Because they
exposed.
were afraid public health would find out
Yeah,
that there was a
yeah,
exposure to COVID, but we weren't. We signed all the things.
yeah.
We tested. We were fine. So it was a confusing time. I try to give his caregivers the benefit of the doubt, not his caregivers, his administration.
Sure.
But yeah, that was tested. That
Well,
was
and those
really
even
tested.
administration, I think they were getting it from higher up in the government
Oh,
too,
they
right?
were
I mean, it
under
was just a
extreme
bad.
stress by public health for
Yeah,
sure, and it wasn't their fault.
yeah.
But they had to enforce rules that made no sense.
That made no sense. Yeah.
And then my brother suffered. That was
It's
the
a
hardest.
miracle, I will say, Camille. Having seen what I saw in the hospital, it's a miracle he survived. Only because just the isolation and let's say if there was an aspiration, you know what I mean? Just so many things could have gone
Well,
wrong.
I could share one thing I share in the book, but
Mm,
briefly, in case it helps someone else. I don't know that he would have if I
mm,
didn't. He was at the third hospital, and for COVID, he got isolated. He finally tested positive, and they had to test him like every day. And
sure.
I wasn't always certain those tests were accurate, but whatever. If you had to
Agreed.
do them, you had to do them. So he finally got tested positive. He had a little bit of symptoms finally. He didn't at first, but they had to hospitalize him. I had him on a protocol before he went to the hospital when he had a few symptoms because I believed in the symptoms were more accurate than the test. So I
Yeah.
got
We
him on
never tested.
something.
We never tested.
Yeah, well, I think that was smart. I learned a lot about testing and I
Yeah.
actually advocated on
Yeah.
that and I knew more than most doctors did about how those tests were done. But I had him on a protocol that like at the time was controversial. Probably now everybody thinks, oh yeah, that was right. But and then that my personal doctor for Kevin
Mhm.
approved, but when he got to the hospital, he could no longer approve it. And so they took him off without telling me.
Mm.
And because he was already almost better, but then he started getting worse in the hospital. Why is he getting worse? He was on this medication that I wanted him on and this supplement. And they said, oh, we don't know. Well, it turns out not only did they take him off the protocol I had wanted, but they had put him on the remdesivir, which I'm sure you know about.
Yeah.
And I found out about this and this doctor wouldn't budge. He's like, no, this is what the studies
Yeah.
show. This is the protocol. Well, it turned out later the hospital's getting paid for all this. And, it's like they didn't have a choice. So I took it all the way up, like I think 3 or 4 different levels until I
Mhm.
got to the chief medical officer and I had to talk with him. And I knew my stuff.
Yeah.
I medically knew my stuff. He said, well, I can't override anybody below me,
Yeah.
but I get a call back later and it's like, yeah, they took him off the thing I wanted and then they
Mhm.
put him back on the thing I did want. And he was better within 48 hours.
Yeah.
But then he had to stay another like 15 days because they had to be there 20 days and they had to be isolated for 20
Yeah.
days after.
But I think that's where I think, that it got a little scary. It wasn't even just the illness because I mean, I don't want to go in too much into COVID, but regardless, Kevin probably could have survived that. It's the isolation.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
lack the lack of observation,
Yes.
the lack of being able to see is he aspirating, is something going on, having to isolate my family, the broken spirits. That's what I
It
mean
did break his
when people died prematurely. And
Yeah.
I think of somebody like him that could not speak for himself.
Correct.
The illness, not worried about that at all. I actually think he probably would have done better than most people because he's young and he had a good heart and a lot was going on. But it's just the isolation that I think.
Yeah, I apologize if I took it to a
No,
different
no, no,
direction,
that's okay.
but yeah, absolutely. He had other incidents
Yeah.
where he was in the hospital, got healed, different time,
Yeah.
aspiration pneumonia again. And
Yeah.
then they had to isolate him for 20 days
Yeah.
when he got back before he could integrate with his
Yeah.
home, which was a rule for ICFs, not for
Yeah.
anybody who lived in
Mhm.
the home, which felt very discriminatory. So, and then he did get worse again. And it was a cycle. And then they wanted to send him to the
Sure.
hospital again because if you sit in your wheelchair all day in a room alone with only a hazmat person
Yeah.
coming in to feed you,
How
that kills
scary
you.
too, by the way. I mean, how scary. I mean, who knows if people are explaining, what's going on, but just the power of human touch too sometimes.
Totally. Totally.
I really believe in that. That's why everybody kind of makes fun of me. They're like, I can't believe you sit on patients' beds. And I'm like, to sit on a patient's bed and like start their IV. I always ask if I can sit on their bed and you just sit and talk to them. They think it's like the grossest thing ever because I can't believe they're dirty. But that's how you
Wow.
are able to look them in the eye. I don't like standing over people, and during COVID, it just got really crazy. I know for me, stepping away from a patient or even a family I've cared for deeply, walking away, coming home, there would be a lot of times I could feel, a lot of guilt or sadness. They kind of just, it doesn't happen with all of them, but there are some, you guys were one of them, to where it was just hard to walk away. It was hard to like not call and be like, how are they doing? How did you navigate setting emotional boundaries, without feeling like you were abandoning Kevin?
Yeah. I think I was bad at it. And
Emotionally bad at it?
yeah,
Yeah.
emotionally bad at boundaries. Um, because for me, it was like if I made a boundary, I felt like I was abandoning him because who is going to speak up for him? Who else does he
Mhm.
have? They didn't have the ability for his home to send staff there to just
Mhm.
be with him. They don't have the staffing. They're so short staffed. And even if they did, they wouldn't know how to advocate for my brother. So
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think I had great boundaries. I think part of the writing the book process was an 11-year journey. I think I was teaching myself as I was writing. So I learned things. And I think now I am really learning to have more emotional boundaries. But when you do feel like with someone like Kevin, that really is dependent on people and
Mhm.
specifically people like his sister. You do feel like you have to kind of harden your heart just a little bit. And that feels like you're abandoning them. That and then the guilt comes.
Yeah.
So I think I've struggled with guilt a lot. Um, but I've seen, my dad and my mom, I talk about like my dad
Mhm.
really growing up, it looked like from the outside, he really did press in, even though it was hard for him to see him. He always disciplined himself to go see him. It used to be once a week, then it kind of became once a month. It's hard.
Yeah.
My mom struggled with seeing him because it hurt too much.
Mm.
And so she kind of backed away a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I saw both modeled. So I think finding that balance is important because you can't constantly feel guilty.
Mhm.
There's actually no reason for it. I talk about like
Mhm.
how I learned that. Doesn't help him any when I feel guilty, but you also can't completely cut it off because then you don't feel anymore.
Right.
So it's how do you find that balance
Yeah.
between empathy and boundaries? It's
It's
hard.
it's so true. I told my boss one time, especially during COVID, and they were like, "You just seem this, you seem that." I'm like, "You need to be grateful that I'm either angry or I'm sad. It's when I feel nothing.
Heck,
When I am
so true.
when I am indifferent and I just don't care, that's when it's time for me, to be done." And you do say something in here. You say, when you would go, um, while I wanted to be with him when I saw him, the anticipation of our visit seemed more dreadful to me than exciting. Why? Perhaps because the encounter was never satisfying. It brought pain, guilt, and suffering, but it was a duty. And then you also talk about, how am I to think about my own needs when Kevin is sitting there in a wheelchair and is he wondering when he's going to visit his family again? I'm sure if those thoughts really kind of dominated you, I bet that would be, really hard to set those boundaries.
Still do.
Oh,
Yeah. It's
wow.
so hard.
And how long has it been? I mean, he's been
He's he'll be 55 on Saturday.
on Saturday. How special that we're able to do this right before his birthday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's still so hard. Um, I feel his pain. I think that's why I had to capture a name for this because it's not just a sister with a disabled brother.
Mhm.
It's a 30-year-old daughter with a mom with
Yeah.
early set Alzheimer's. It's a spouse who has a spouse going through cancer that
Yeah.
doesn't look good. It's a new mom with an autistic
Well, yeah,
diagnosis with
we
her
just talked
baby.
about this yesterday. I texted you and I was crying. I said, I never knew. I mean, I obviously knew what I felt, and I want to talk about that in a little bit too, but I didn't really know what that felt, that it was the secondhand suffering because I'm now sending my daughter to a therapeutic boarding school in Utah. What kind of a mother are you? How could you do that?
Wow, yeah.
And feeling like she's 16. What is she going to feel? What is she going to think? What if this goes bad? I mean, and there wasn't a day, and it was really hard for me too to set those boundaries. I wish I would have had this book. Oh my gosh, because you just talk about the spiritual journey through it all and the revelations. There's so much in here. I mean, I literally could have asked 100 questions. We'll have lunch one day to ask the rest, but um, I think that was what it helped kind of give a name to what I was feeling as well. And I'll still feel it. Today is my daughter's last day of her outpatient program. She never did drugs or alcohol, but it's just the autism and dealing with mental health stuff.
Sure.
Today we're celebrating it's her last day. And,
Wow.
we've just gone through 2 years of grieving a process I thought the experience would be with a mom with her daughter, that I had to kind of let go and just accept what it is and just kind of be present when I can. And that's what I read a lot about, about you even talking about fairness and all of these different, things. One of the things I love that you talk about was empathy. And I'd love to know, and I want to read something here. I don't think I ever thought about empathy this way. I thought you kind of just have it or you don't.
Mhm.
Um, I thought this was interesting. All right, listeners, quick nurse to patient moment. If you've ever had to get an MRI or a CAT scan, you know that waiting for answers can feel like its own diagnosis. That's why I want you to know about Advanced Imaging Center. Advanced Imaging Center has been serving the community since 1998. And with 4 locations in Palmdale, Lancaster, Valencia, and Ridgecrest, California, they make care easy to reach. They offer stat and same day appointments, plus early mornings, evenings, and even weekend hours, because life doesn't wait, and neither should your health. They have everything covered under one roof, including MRI, even open MRI for those of you who get claustrophobic like I do. They have CAT scan, mammograms, ultrasound, x ray biopsies, and so much more. They take PPO and HMO insurances, Medicare, Medi-Cal, workers' comp, and also offer discounted cash pricing. So if you need imaging or someone you love does, visit aicscan.com or call 661-949-8111 and let them know Mindie sent you. Advanced Imaging Center, bringing clarity to the moments that matter. So I want to talk a little about empathy, and you talk about this in the book, and it was really something that I never thought about it like this, about it being a choice. And it's funny, we were talking about this earlier, and even my husband and different people, how they're like, "Oh, I'm just not emotional," but you don't have to be emotional to be empathetic, and for it to be a choice. You say, "I had always thought that we were either wired to be empathetic, emotional people, or we aren't." That's how I always thought too. While each of us differs to the degree we are naturally empathetic, I've learned that being empathetic is also a choice, a discipline, not just a feeling, and one that comes with unspoken blessings to those who engage with it. And then you say true empathy is the feeling of actually participating in the suffering of another. Then you go on and talk about why empathy is important, because not only I think people in the medical field need to hear this, but I just think in general, our kids or just people, especially in the culture of our world right now, what things that are going on in the world, it says, why is cultivating empathy important? It enhances our ability to connect with others, creates bonds of trust, understands human behavior, reduce conflict, identify with others and their perspectives, helps us make better decisions, sharpen our people acumen. Is that right? Did I say that? Acumen? And make others feel valued. As someone who works with executives in recruiting capacity and coaches them in a career transition for many years, I have seen the field of emotional intelligence flourish in business. And you go on to talk about how, emotional IQ, is just as important as, in intelligence. Um, what do you feel that what do you feel like you've learned about self-compassion through, um, especially for those of us who I think are nurturers or just who give so much? You obviously are a giver, and you talk a lot about this empathy. I think you were born with this, by the way. I don't think this is something that you just learned. I don't know. I could be wrong. What have you learned about self-compassion for those of us who give so much to others?
First of all, I love the word self dash compassion. I'm hyphenated word,
Mm-hmm.
more than I like self-care. And I think I've actually never thought about this. So your question's very fresh to me. I hear a lot of, the younger generations now, all the influencers talk about, oh, you need to have self-care. And then they advertise all their products that
Oh
they're
yeah.
getting paid for. And I struggle with that a little bit because I feel like that feels elevating self in a almost I'm not knocking self-care. I mean, obviously I should do more of it. No
We need
fingernails
it.
and
We
all
need
that.
it.
But
But it is nice, like self care. Babe, I'm going to go get a massage today
yeah, I
and a
mean, I'm in
pedicure,
favor
manicure.
of
We
it.
love
I'm
it.
definitely in
Yes.
favor of self-care. I'm not against it. I just think that it's almost like it can feel a little I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to use it, like idolatry about self. Like, we're so important. We need this for us to help, and it that I don't like. I like what you said with self-compassion though, because I think having compassion for yourself is 100% necessary. And I do think I have learned that the older I'm getting,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean it's the old phrase, and we all know it, like you put the oxygen mask on you first in the
Sure.
airplane before you can help your kid. And that is true. My like the example when I met you, my dad and I were going so strong that I was depleted. I was so dark in my spirit that I was no good to my husband. I was no good to my 3 kids at home at the
Mm-hmm.
time. I, wasn't helping around the house. I was neglecting every other priority that
Right.
was important, including myself.
Yeah.
And if I had just taken a chill pill and
Mm-hmm.
said, you know what? God, take care of Kevin today because I can't go
Yeah.
in.
I got
I
to
have a
have enough
feeling.
compassion for myself to be
Yeah.
able to give anymore, kind
Yeah.
of giving out of an empty cup.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I was so running on empty. So I have learned I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So there are boundaries that I put in place, at least with Kevin now. It's when he's in an emergency, it's very hard to have any boundaries. That's why I feel like you kind of do need to just store up some regular habitual
Yes.
compassion for yourself. Like take the time on a daily and a weekly basis, especially when you're not in a crisis, because
Mm-hmm.
secondhand suffering could be a very long term. It could be a 40-year journey or
Sure.
50-year journey, or it could be a short-term 5-week journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but either way, you have to have the reserves. You
Yeah.
can't go on empty. It helps no one. So I'm
Sure.
all in favor of compassionate care and even self-care. I don't mean to be judgmental, but I
I don't
just,
think you're judgmental. I actually think because you come from a place of giving so much to someone who can't really give to themselves. So I think it's a bit of a different perspective because for someone who hasn't really had to take on, whether it be a parent, with a young child or an elderly parent you got to take care of, I do think it's kind of the younger generation. We see it a lot with new nurses coming on the floor, right? I was just talking about this earlier, where they're not expecting to clean someone or they're not expecting to do these things because they're not in a mode of caring for somebody yet. That's just their view of the job is very different. I'm here for the schedule. I'm here for the money. I do love people and I care for them, but whoa, that's a lot of dirty work. And I think you've experienced so much caring for somebody that to have some self compassion and the whole concept of self care, I don't think it's a bad thing. I do think we need it as well. But you come from such a different place to where you've experienced to where you really need to care for somebody.
and to be honest, I'm not actually the one doing the day-to-day caring, giving of my brother. I actually feel more compassion for his actual direct
Right.
care staff,
Right.
and I worry about them. And so sometimes I'm having second sense suffering for them
Yes.
because I feel like they need to be doing the
Yes.
self-care, compassion care, whatever you
Right.
want to call
And
it.
what our nurses need to. And I love that you say that because when I was reading this, yes, I can feel it in other ways of my life, but being a nurse, I mean, you leave and you're feeling, I mean, you talk about compassion fatigue, right? Or just getting burnout on the job, no matter how much you want to give and love. Like if you're not filling yourself up or, like you said, taking those habitual times to what you need, I can't go and I give to other people. I'll be out of gas. And the term secondhand suffering, that really resonated with me with my daughter, somebody who's struggling. The downside of that for me though is, and I deal with this as a nurse, it's a blessing and a curse to me. I love to feel so deeply. Gosh, it can really take a toll
Yeah.
on my body and me. I love what you said here. You said the downside of empathy for me is the more I experience another person's pain, the more I make myself vulnerable to the same pain, resulting in secondhand suffering. Even still, I would rather live with an open and tender heart, be able to relate to others empathetically, and risk painful emotions than go through life with my heart locked in a protective box,
Yeah.
blocking out the full extent of human emotion. And then you talk about the consequence of locking up your heart to detach from having empathetic feelings. To risk nothing is to gain nothing. And when we risk empathy, we gain a bigger and richer life. And I literally put here nursing. That if we take that risk and really give and really go to work to give and be empathetic, give more than the average person, sit on that bed, have that talk, it is a much richer life. I mean, look at the relationship that came out of it for us. Look at
Right.
like the impact that maybe that had on you guys and what Kevin's life is because of you guys taking on that. But there is a bit of suffering.
Yeah, you risk your heart being
Mhm.
on in a vulnerable place. And but I do think sometimes the blessings you don't always know at the moment, but in retrospect you can find them. And I was thinking as you were saying that, like the Grinch movie or getting into holiday
That's
season.
my favorite movie. I actually underlined
Did I talk about that in there?
you have a quote of the
Oh,
Grinch.
I totally forgot that. Oh,
You
yeah, yeah.
too.
But how his heart grew like 3 times the
Yeah.
size after he started feeling the sadness of these kids who didn't get
Yes.
pregnancy presents. That might
Yes.
have to be not pregnant, the
Tongue
kids
tied.
that got presents.
Mhm.
His heart grew because he had this change, and like we grew up with that show, but it's a fun example of like, yeah, it does grow our heart, I think. But as you were saying, the other thing I thought of, like I have a friend right now who's going through really bad cancer, like
Mm.
really, really bad. And I've noticed what's changed is I still feel her pain. I still suffer with her. I think about her all the time. I pray for her and I'm feeling it. But at the same time, there is a depth that I feel with my own brother that I think I allow myself to go to. Whereas with a friend, a good friend, but not like a best friend or
Sure.
anything, I, I think I have a little bit more of a boundary to
Mhm.
let my so it's almost like we can still feel empathy for everyone, but how much can we feel the
Yes.
depth of empathy? Probably not everybody. Like we
Right.
might have to reserve that for, our closest friends and not
Sure.
who we see on the news every night because we go crazy. We
Absolutely.
go crazy, right? We can't,
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm feeling the
Well, you
pain of so much on the news, but at the same time, I can't let
yeah, I've had
myself
to
go there.
disconnect it at points. It's just like
It's
too
too
hard for
much.
me.
We're not wired for
Well,
it.
one of the things you do talk about with your mom in regards to empathy, you talk about your mom. And this really hit me too because you talk about her guilt and her health problems, like whether it be the high blood pressure or the anxiety and the need to control. And you said, like wanting to control you. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I was doing with my daughter.
Yes.
And the amount of health problems I developed
Mm.
while going through this.
Yeah.
I mean, colitis, psoriasis, all these different things, autoimmune, because even though maybe I wasn't outwardly, I was still going to work, I was still doing all the things, being a wife and being a nurse, but my body was screaming. And then you mentioned that she, did have some dementia going on, but that she ended up having a stroke, and that you're convinced that the toll that was taken on her body from maybe the guilt or
Yeah.
what she was feeling probably contributed to her dying so young. Do you still feel that way?
I do. I think, as medical science progresses, you learn, oh, she shouldn't have been taking the calcium pills without the K2 and the vitamin
Sure.
D. Like, yeah, so
Mhm.
that could have caused the calcified arteries or whatever, which was part of the problem. So yes, I know there's probably some stuff like that, but yes, 100% the her she would block out the pain. And so a lot of the
Mhm.
theme of my book is what I've learned is by going through the pain, not
Right.
around it,
Mhm.
you actually can come to a greater place of peace and depth,
Mhm.
and even joy when you face reality and
Right.
you don't try to avoid it and
And try not
suppress
to
it.
numb it out
My
too.
mom unfortunately tried to numb it out, and I could never really get her to talk about a serious topic for too long. And I love her. Bless you, mom. Please don't get mad at me. But she would look at her watch a lot. Like when we were visiting Kevin, it's like, okay, is it time to leave? Because it was so uncomfortable for her.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know until later in life, much later in life, was that she blamed herself,
Mhm.
for Kevin. So can you imagine walking around all her life, like thinking that she is the reason he is like this? And the doctor said that's not true. You know, she made up a reason, but she had a gut feeling like maybe there was something to what she was saying with the medicine she was on. I don't know, but she shouldn't have ever felt that way. You know, like that
But
was
don't we do that as moms? I
we
mean, even with
do.
Haley with having high functioning autism, I literally was like, what meds did I take during I was pregnant? And did I cause this? Was I on her too hard when she started struggling mental health? Did I yell at her? Did I make her feel? Did I bully her? Like you literally take on
We
all of
do.
that.
I did it with my son who had Lyme's disease and Hashimoto's, and he kept saying every morning, "Mom, I can't go to school because I'm hurting, my joints are hurting, I can't get up." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's just growing pains. You just don't want to see your teacher, and you hate school. Get out of bed." I had
Exactly.
no empathy for him at
Yes.
all. 9 months
Yes.
of that, and finally, I get the report. And he's like, his neck is this big, and he's got like 9 years of a fight with Lyme's disease and Hashimoto's. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, son. Like I thought." It's just growing pains. I'm so sorry. So I understand the guilt. And I think my mom just suffered with a lot of anxiety. And I think we all do, but I think it's how you deal with it. Like facing it and getting help. I wanted her to like get counseling or get,
Yeah.
just talk to your friends. Just talk to me about it. And let's talk about it, mom.
Yeah.
And
Because
let's
it's
not
normal
avoid
what she
it.
was feeling, right?
Totally normal. And the longer she's gone, the more I'm like, oh, I totally relate to her. I understand her now. I'm so
Mm,
sorry I judged her. And, it's easy for me to say, I mean, she was bearing all that weight. I was
yeah.
just a kid.
I hope I read that part too, and I thought, oh my God, please. I hope my daughter one day like gets
Oh, she
why
does.
we did what we did. And then she even, I mean,
Yes.
she's doing great now, but you want her to understand I did this because I love you and I was trying to protect you,
Totally.
right? And it seems like you're so much able to empathize with your mom now
Yeah.
that she's gone and you're older. It
Totally.
seems not polar opposite, but it seems like your dad really took on. I even read how he chose to take his pain and use it to have an impact and a ripple effect with college students and taking on people and really being at Kevin's bedside. Do you feel that was? Um, I witnessed this. He was. You guys were a sacrificial family, for Kevin. I really see that. Do you feel that was that his way of coping, or do you feel, or was that just genuinely him that he just saw the positive in it and took it for we're going to take this bad situation and make it for good? Because I do think you could go either way, right?
Yeah. I don't think it was the latter. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
he would say it was the latter. I think my dad is a very no conflict, easy kind of guy. He'll
Mm-hmm.
fight for stuff when he believes it's right.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big justice guy, also like I am. But I think he felt like the role he could do, he couldn't change anything. So what could he change? I talk about finding purpose from
Yes.
pain. I
Yes.
don't think he put those words to it, but when his in as a role at Pepperdine, he would started this service learning program where the first class he brought to go to where
Mm-hmm.
Kevin lives and help them with a business plan as part of the course. And this all the kids would meet my brother and they would get to know him, and it formed a great deal of empathy and compassion for them. So it was a win-win for everybody. The
Yeah.
foundation got helped and my brother got to see people, and my dad was doing.
And it's community too, right? You talk a lot about community, how we need that when we're suffering. I mean, it sounds like he even created a little community, right, for
Well,
him.
families within the institution my brother was living. It was a
Mm-hmm.
family group, and they raised money, gave rewards to the staff, and it was really beautiful. In fact, we need to get back to that. That kind of has changed, unfortunately. But yeah,
Mm.
he was a big advocate of the caregivers and the staff and the administration, and we need to
Mm-hmm.
support them. They're supporting my son, and he led it for 20 years, a community
Wow.
group within this organization where my brother lives. So yeah, he's more practical. I'm more the feeler. Like he feels, but then he stops,
Yeah.
because he has a really good boundary. Like if he feels too much, it breaks
It's
him.
just too
So
much.
he
Yeah.
has, so he'll do practical things, and I try to do practical things too. That's kind of my thing now too. But I think I feel it maybe a little deeper,
Sure.
like my mom did, and my mom would cut it off. I just allow myself to,
Mm-hmm.
get.
But that's what's great about this book is I feel like you're kind of taking what your mom did not have the capacity to do.
But she could have, and she wanted to, because she was
It
very tenacious
yes.
in every other thing in life. But
Yes.
when
She
it
just
came to
didn't have the
Kevin,
tools. She didn't know how, but you're teaching people through this book how to do it.
I hope so.
Like don't suffer like my mom did.
Yeah.
Don't go through life with these health issues and not deal. Like you're even through the community or even your faith. Seems like your faith is really intense. One of the things that I love this analogy that you talk about here about windmills.
Oh, yeah.
And it says we can be like strong windmills that are planted by no control of our own in a field of harsh winds, the violent elements of life, and stand firm, unwavering, turning our circumstances into a powerful force for good as we churn energies into our communities. When the winds of change blow, some people build walls, other people build windmills. I got chill bumps on that one. Wow. Say my notes. I thought that was so powerful. Again, wishing I would have, had those words when I was dealing with Haley. I feel like that windmill is how you birthed this book. This is like throwing that energy, out into the community for other people to
Mm.
learn from your experience.
It's so funny because I remember writing the book, and the reason that popped in my head is going back to my early childhood. As you may recall, I would my mom would be taking care of my two brothers, and I was bored a lot as a kid. We didn't have iPhones or iPads, or
Yeah.
there's only three channels. So I would walk outside, and there was a neighbor across the street who was an artist, and I just remember sitting and watching her paint this painting for weeks and weeks, and it was of a windmill.
Mm.
And I always thought, oh, she made a mistake because two of them are like out more. Like, oh, they needed, like, I didn't realize Windows actually had that. So
Yeah.
I just remember that as a kid. It was one of my early memories. And so as I was writing, I did feel a lot of supernatural strength as I was writing, because I only wrote when I felt like I had something. I didn't force myself to write this book. It kind of just came out of me, out of grief. And that came to mind. So then I had this whole analogy, and I was like, wow, that is good. So thank you for mentioning that. It
It
was
really
sometimes those early memories we have actually can be symbolic of things that we have epiphanies for as we
Yeah.
grow older.
It really, really stuck out to me because I do think it's easy to build a wall, not let people in, grieve, kind of isolate yourself. And you talked about it earlier. And just for time's sake, I could ask you so many other things, but I want people to go get the book, so we want them to read it. And I'm gonna end with this because this choked me up. You've alluded to this. You alluded to this earlier about you were in a dark place. And the interesting thing is I did not know that that was at the time when I met you. I just thought it was some random hospitalization. Um, this kind of stopped me yesterday. I had to kind of take a deep breath because no one had kind of really had said something like this out loud with dealing with somebody that it wasn't you necessarily suffering, it was somebody else.
Mm.
And this is exactly what I felt when I was dealing with situations with my daughter. Because there was one day, not a lot of people even know this, but I was sitting in my bathroom floor at my other house. Even my husband didn't know how dark it was. I was just feeling so helpless with my daughters before we got her help. When you're trying to advocate, you're screaming for people to help you, and doctors just don't know, right? They don't know what to do. And I called my friend, and I told her, I said, I think I need to end it.
Mm.
I can't take it. And you really convince yourself that everybody's going to be better off. I really thought my daughter would be better off without me.
Wow.
I thought um, I'm going to be one of those people that they're going to be like, oh my God, she had it all. And she was just a great nurse. But what was going on? Because I couldn't take on the pain of what I was feeling with my daughter. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't help her. No one could help me, and no one could help her.
Wow.
And you wrote here, at one point, I felt like I didn't want to live anymore. A darkness came over me, and while I could never understand why anyone would ever want to take their life, I finally understood the despair of that feeling. Something had overcome my spirit. The secondhand suffering was just too much to bear. It was so dark and draining, and there seemed to be no end in sight. I couldn't bear to keep watching my brother suffer so intensely, and yet I had no choice. It was a no way out feeling that was crippling my dad and me. It was such a dark time. If you have ever taken care of a loved one full time, I know you understand the burden more than most. And people would ask me, how's your brother? And I found myself somewhat paralyzed to respond. And that's how I would feel. They'd be like, how's your daughter? And what do you say? I want to die right now. I don't want to be a part of this. I just want you to know that brought so much. Not that I ever want anybody to feel that, but the fact of like, I've never thought about anybody taking their life. I've always understood, never quite understood why. But to hear somebody say that when I have felt that because of the pain you feel for someone else, that there's no way out, that was
Wow.
that was
And
quite intense.
yeah, thank you for being honest. I mean, I feel weird even talking about it. I debated putting in there because you don't want to like give permission for other people to, like start, oh, I think I feel that way too. No,
Yeah,
no, no. It was a darkness that came over me and
absolutely.
you that like it's so indescribable. And you hear about it when people feel individually suffering, but when it's suffering on behalf of someone
For
else,
somebody else.
it's probably those who are high empathetic, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was a darkness, and after that feeling, I remember telling a bunch of friends, wonderful friends, good friends, and I don't think they even believed me. It's like I'm like I don't even think I can go on, you guys, and they like kind of look like
Mm.
shocked, but like
Well, and because you're always the strong one too. I mean, especially with taking care of him, I would
well,
assume they
and
saw you
it was just
differently.
weird. It's like they knew me. Like, of course you don't feel like way. It was just very like no guys are really
Yeah,
really. It was I've never experienced that dark to this day.
yeah,
It was
same.
a moment in time, and I think part of it was my body was exhausted.
Yeah,
I think I was doing too much. I didn't
yeah.
have good
Lack of
boundaries.
that self compassion, not
Yeah,
taking care of yourself.
we ended up hiring one of my dear friends, Karen. Shout out to Karen, who came in and we hired her.
Mm.
She needed a little extra spending money, and she probably would have done it for free. But like we need relief, we need help. Like we reached out and we got a little help. That just got us a nap,
Yeah.
and that just gave us a little break. But she was wonderful.
Mm.
So I learned more tools after that because I'm like I can't get to that point ever again.
Yeah.
That one, I never felt though that everybody would be better off. I didn't feel that. I felt like, no, I'd let everybody down.
Yeah.
They need me here.
Right.
So I
They
didn't
actually
feel
need me.
that, but I understand now
The
more than I ever
darkness.
did that darkness. It was
Yeah.
very, very horrible.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to feel like that. That's why getting those tools in place,
Yeah.
the tools, the whole book is about tools, but it's body,
Mm.
what I would call soul and spirit. It's
Mhm.
tools for all three
Yeah.
because if we don't take care of our body will collapse. We don't take care of our soul. I call my soul. I've learned this. Our mind, our mind, our will, and our emotions,
Mm.
and our spirit. That's that spiritual connection. For me, it's with God that I can't live without. And if we can strengthen all those three areas before the crisis hits,
Right.
before that dark moment hits, almost like an immune system for all three
Yeah.
sectors
Gets you
of our
strong for
holistic
it.
being,
Hmm.
we will be better prepared
Yeah.
to be able to handle those situations where we don't have to enter that darkness. And
Mhm.
if those tools in my book can help someone going
Absolutely.
through it, either before it happens or in retrospect, like to help others, like then great. Like that would bring me purpose from my pain.
Yeah.
So
Well, I feel like that line, I don't think I've ever even talked about that publicly. I think you saying it made me be like, wow,
mm,
maybe more people, they think you have it all together and then you could
yeah,
feel that darkness. I didn't feel like anybody could have understood the darkness. They'd be like, what are you talking about? You have everything you could ever want. But when you described that darkness, I was like, oh gosh, I feel like she's looking
wow.
inside of me. So I appreciate that. And I feel like that's a lifeline.
I think when we
Um,
don't feel alone, that alone can help. Like
yeah.
if nothing changes, when we don't feel invisible anymore, we feel like we are seen, we are heard, we are loved, cared for um, by, for me, God. That alone makes a difference.
Yeah. And I think those dark times also are where you meet whatever, if it's God, universe, whatever it is, spirit, that's when the
Mhm.
depths of that is when you can actually get to it. So,
Yeah, when you feel the depths,
yeah.
it's like then those
Yeah.
doors open.
Yeah. You have so much judgment from like religious and whatever. And I'm like, but that is when I like met God was in the depths, right?
I know.
Well, I am so grateful for this. And this book is just so powerful. And I'm just grateful for God bringing you into my life and the being able to meet Kevin and your dad and just a special family. I really believe that all this kind of has been orchestrated again for some reason. And I'd love to come see Kevin if that's okay at
Come to
some
his
point.
birthday party on
Yay!
Saturday.
Yes, I'm supposed to leave town and I'm not now.
That's
So
okay.
I'd love to give him a big hug. So thank you. I love what you're doing. Just a life of sacrifice. You really are a truly amazing example of sacrifice and your brother's keeper. So thank you for
Oh,
coming out here. And if
thank you.
people can get your book or want to get your book, which I know they will, Kirk Cameron wrote the foreword on that. Can I just say, people in my generation, Kirk Cameron, love
And
him.
Chelsea, his wife.
I love him. Yes, Chelsea, his wife. I know we love you too, but we really love Kirk Cameron. How can we get this? And if you don't mind, we'll speak right there, right? Is that where we want to speak on how to get it, where to get it?
Yeah. Thank you. So Amazon, basically any place that sells books, you can get it. It's published worldwide and 12 printers all over the country. So my website is camilleblock.cc, and my Instagram and Facebook would love you to follow me. So I'm trying to post more content about my brother and about just the topic as well. And that, I guess, is just camilleblock.author on either one of those.
So people can reach out to you if they
Yeah,
resonate with the story.
through the
They
website,
can reach
you
out
could
to you.
reach me through my email. And
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining this powerful Lifeline life support episode, and we will see you next shift. Thanks for listening to Call the Nurse. I'm Mindie, navigating life one shift, one story, one breath at a time. If today's episode resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who just might need a little life support. Until next time, breathe deeply and heal gently, and I'll see you next shift.